morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host and baker influencer, Richard Charpentier, and every Tuesday we gather to answer your questions sent from the bakers, answered by yours truly, Richard. So let's get started with our first question of the day. There's a company wanting to know their manufacturer of tortillas and pastries, and they have a Kieffer, which is Kieffer. So it's an analytical tool, and they want to know, they see the results that they do not show a big difference between the good and the bad pastry dough. Do you recommend using the Kieffer Dough Fixture method or something else we can do? So just for those who are not familiar, the Kieffer Dough and Gluten Extensibility Rig was invented by Dr. Kieffer at the Kurt Hess Institute in Munich, and it's a method to determine the dough and gluten extensibility, similar to the extensograph. So if you do not see that much difference in production or extensibility, that means there is not much difference with your different flours that you're using. If you have the Kieffer, I recommend any analytical tool where you can get analysis of your flour and understand how better the extensibility of the flour versus another works. It's always a good investment to have the people trained to use those tools, and it's always good to have those type of analytical equipment in your bakeries. If the Kieffer does not work or you do not have access to that tool, there's also the extensograph, which is a similar tool that measures the extensibility and the gluten performance in your wheat flour. Those are the tools, but the key result is in the end product. If you make a product and your tortillas and you see they break, it could be also based on your formulation, the type of fermentation you're using. It could be, the acidity of your finished product, how you're processing. You're mentioning tortilla. Is this a sheeted or pressed tortilla, which would make a difference as well in the type of quality flour you would need. But, and it would be for another time. But thank you very much for sending that question, and best of luck researching for the best analytical tool for your bakery. Now, for our second question of the day is again on analytical tools. Someone wants to know, how do we test the farinograph or the extensograph? And should I get to the 500 BU after 5 minutes of mixing to stop the mixing, plus 10 minus 10 BU? And so basically you're asking the best way to run a farinograph or an extensograph. For that, I recommend, using the material. Usually a farinograph as a 300 gram material, and you fill out to the 500, the liquid to the 500 BU until it gets to that line. And the more modern version of the farinographs are all automated, so it's dispensing the water automatically, so you don't have to have an operator doing it. That's what I would recommend if you don't have the trained employee. And I know you mentioned the extensograph, but the extensograph is a different tool, than the farinograph. So not to be confused, although they serve both the purpose of measuring the quality and the consistency of your flour, your incoming flour, they serve different purposes. So if you have time, go to the Bakerpedia page and look and type extensograph and farinograph, and then you'll find information with more details. And if that's not enough, you can go to websites of the manufacturer of those pieces of equipment and find all the details on how to better use it, because it all depends on the type of models you have. And now, like I said, you have newer models that are fully automated and almost, operator free. Just press a button and walk away and go back to make your bread, and you get a result. So that's it. So I hope good luck with your search. And now for our last question of the day, is someone wants to know about hamburger buns, and they're having issues about wrinkles on the surface of the buns after slicing and packing. What could be the issue? So there's a lot of things that could be the issue, and I will go through, every issues that could potentially be that. One is your flour. You could be using a flour with too much strength. That could be, don't know the protein content, the type of starch damage of your flour. So I would start looking at the ingredients and the type of formulation. How much yeast are you using in your formulation? If you have too much yeast and too much available sugar for the yeast, that will activate and expand it quickly in the oven spring. Are you using any type of good dough conditioner that could basically accentuate your oven spring and the push of the buns in the oven, which will extend, and it's having loose skin if you stretch it too much, and it's coming back and doing that. How are you proofing it? What is the relative humidity in your box? If your buns are overly wet, if your relative humidity is too high and the top is too wet, that could create also wrinkling issues. The temperature at which you're using for baking your buns, the baking profile could also affect those as well. And then once they're coming out, how do you cool the buns? Do you cool them in a room? At what temperature are the buns packaged? Because that will also could contribute to condensation within your packaging, and therefore creating the wrinkles or crow's feet used in the industry. So there's a lot of little factors. There's unfortunately, not one factor that would say this is it. And I forgot to mention dough temperature as well, and then the process. So if you have further questions and would like to receive more help on that, I recommend you go to the Bakerpedia page and look for under bakery resources and get a consultant even for an hour to help you out with your problem. And then it's easier to go look at in more detail, all the different points and areas that could potentially create your problem. Well, that's it for today, my friends. So I will see you today for another Tuesday 10 at 10, and happy baking. See you.